Another big game. Another big game. They don't stop. When you start the season as poorly as we did, the big games they come every week. But this one is big for both teams. So, neither team's going to lay down if things go bad. Neither team is going to just toss it away. Both teams are going to come out thinking that they desperately need to win this game. So, I certainly won't shy away from the fact that this is a very important game for us, but it was interesting. I was actually looking at some Monte Carlo simulations last week after the 49ers game. And what a Monte Carlo simulation is it basically simulates the entire season like 5,000 times. I think this particular simulation I did looked at it 10,000 times, inserts the win probabilities for every game, and you are then allowed to manipulate the result of a few games and then simulate the rest and see what the odds are of Team X making the playoffs if X, Y, and Z happens. So I was looking at that, and the interesting thing is this season really swings on the Vikings game. If we win that Vikings game, I was going through these simulations, and we lose to Pittsburgh and to Arizona, we would still probably get in at 9-7 as long as we beat the Vikings. The Packers are trying to screw all that up by losing, but we'll get to the Packers when we see whether or not they're going to, go up or down from here on out. But I was going into this game thinking, wow, this is a must-win game, but it's not necessarily. I was surprised by how likely it is that we could get in the playoffs as the 6th seed at 9-7 as long as we beat Minnesota. Whereas if we lose to Minnesota, it doesn't matter if we win all the rest of the games. The odds are against us. So kind of interesting. This is still obviously a very important game for us to, get to 500 for the first time, or over 500 for the first time this season. But I was surprised by how little every other game meant in comparison to the Vikings game. So I'll talk about the Vikings game when it's time. But for this one, it's still an important game, and not only for the win, but just to see this team play well enough to where we actually believe that they would have a chance to win a playoff game if they get there. Because getting in and then losing your first game, that doesn't do anything for me. That doesn't excite me at all. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, there's really no difference between that and not making it at all. So the Steelers, first time they've been in Seattle since I think 2003. Scheduling quirks, and I think this one is going to come down to basically who has the ball last. It's going to be one of those games, and that's not the kind of game that I really like for us, but, so be it. Coming into this season, I thought Pittsburgh was going to have the best offense in football. They had, in my opinion, the best running back and the best wide receiver, also, in my opinion, in Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. They had a good quarterback. They had other good wide receivers. They had a couple decent tight ends. Heath Miller, sometimes he basically plays like a third offensive tackle out there. But this season, he's actually been catching more passes than I expected. So I thought they were going to be the best offense in football. Injuries happened. Roethlisberger missed a bunch of games. Le'Veon Bell barely played this year. And they're still a pretty good offense, but they've had a lot of really bad games to go against some of their really good games. And, I'd like to sit here and talk about how we have beaten all of our losses this year have come against teams that were playing excellent football at the time, at the very least. The Packers, they looked like they were one of the best teams in football when we played them. They've fallen apart over the last month or so, but they looked like they were at the top of the league over that first month and a half. We lost to Arizona. They're obviously one of the best teams in football. Cincinnati, one of the best. And Carolina, they're undefeated. The only exception to that would be the Rams, which is in week 1, and weird stuff can happen in week 1. So looking at that, the season hasn't been nearly as bad as the 5-5 record might indicate, but Pittsburgh, they might be one of those teams, and we just don't know it yet, because if Roethlisberger doesn't get hurt, they probably beat the Ravens, they probably beat the Chiefs, they might beat the Bengals, because he played in that game, but he didn't play well at all, and he kind of threw that game away. And if he wasn't just coming off the injury, you wonder if maybe he would have done a little better. but they might be a really good team that's got a 6-4 record for assorted injuries, and they might not be any worse than the other teams that have come into Seattle and beaten us already, like Arizona and Carolina. They're probably not as good as Carolina, at least, but they might be as good as they might. In fact, not only could they be as good as Arizona, but their offense right now, that's the comp. And if you saw what Arizona did to us 2 weeks ago, that's terrifying because they have a lot of really good wide receivers, just like Arizona. They're one of the few teams in the league that likes to take deep shots along with Arizona. They both, I mean, if you look at the New England offense, the Denver offense, a lot of those, the Giants offense, a lot of those offenses, they keep everything short and simple. But there are a couple offenses left in this league, like Arizona and like Pittsburgh, that love to throw it deep down the field to their outside receivers. And Arizona does it as well as anybody, and Pittsburgh is one of those teams that does it really well too. So that's scary because for years, this defense, the Seahawks defense, was a defense that was one of the best in NFL history at preventing big plays. And if you look at what's happened so far this season, we've gotten away from that a little bit. And now Arizona, and we saw what how Arizona exposed that a couple weeks ago. And now Pittsburgh comes in. They've got a bunch of good wide receivers. They've got a good quarterback with some mobility, and we saw how Carson Palmer was able to use his mobility, which is limited, to buy time in the pocket and make those big plays down the field. Both teams have a good offensive line in a league full of not so good offensive lines. I just think both offenses have a lot in common. And if you saw what Arizona did 2 weeks ago, that's not good. So I don't really expect the defense to have suddenly gotten that much better over the last 2 weeks. So you got to figure Pittsburgh's going to put up 24 points at the minimum, probably closer to 28 or 30. So to me, it's going to be about the offense. The offense has to produce. They have to produce more than they produced in maybe any game so far this season. Turnovers are death. 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out is death. We can't have any of that. We might have to go for it on fourth down a couple of times if we get into a fortunate situation with a 4th-and-1 near midfield or something. And it's time for us to see something really promising out of this offense. Last week was the best the offense has played all year, but it was against the 49ers, a team that has pretty much given up on the season already, a team that has a bad coaching staff, bad personnel, and we put up 4 touchdowns on offense and a field goal. So that was really good, but now we're playing this Pittsburgh defense that I thought they were going to be terrible this year, and they're okay. They've done some good things. They are near the top of the league in sacks. They average close to over 2 sacks a game. But the secondary is suspect. Johnny Manziel threw for nearly 400 yards against them. Arizona put up 470 total offensive yards against them, but they lost that game because they kept turning it over. And the run defense is pretty good too. So it's not a bad defense like I thought it was going to be, but it's not great. It's somewhere in the middle of the league, I think. And a big part of that, of course, is the Steelers' offense has produced pretty well most of their games, and that makes life a little bit easier for the defense. So offense, they need to show up. If this is, if we get into something like what happened in the first half against Arizona, where it's just 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, penalty on first down, penalty on first down, penalty on first down, and then we're punting a whole bunch, I don't see how we come back from that. I mean, the only reason why we almost came back against Arizona was because of basically two defensive touchdowns, and that's not sustainable. So I'm a little concerned about this game. I don't think any real fan who knows this team well right now isn't concerned about this game. We've got no Bruce Irvin. That's no small thing too. He's one of our better pass rushers, and he's versatile as an outside linebacker. Paul Richardson, his ability to go down the field and catch deep balls, I was kind of counting on having it the second half of the season, and hopefully the injury he has is not bad enough to keep him out much longer, because we really could use him next week against a good Vikings defense. And of course, Marshawn Lynch. But the Lynch thing, I don't want to talk about it in the big picture right now because it's depressing. But Thomas Rawls, he's playing about as good as anybody in football right now. So if you got to give the reins over to somebody, give it to Thomas Rawls. So yeah, if we win this game, we'll probably need to put up 30 points, or maybe 28-30. Special team score would be big. Haven't had one in a little while, so lock it. Gear up for that. Defensive touchdown would be big. And I see this being a close game because whatever the hell else happens, the Seahawks team has a way of making the game interesting in the fourth quarter. And I think it might come down to who has the ball last. So I'm putting some faith in the offense by saying that, but it's time for this offense to figure out what they want to be and be that. All right, we'll know more tomorrow. It's not an absolute must-win game, but we need to see the team beat a good team in order to have any kind of belief going forward. So let's get it done. See you guys later.